So I told everyone about the assignments that would be due by the end of this week, and that is a short quiz and discussion post. So the three of you who are here, um, you should submit the discussion post, but you don't have to submit replies since you're here and you're going to discuss those questions with me here. Okay. So that's the perk. You don't have to write your I agree with you. The sky is indeed blue posts, right? So you get the real thing by being here with me. The quiz is mostly half of them are kind of those questions like we were doing the other day with nonsense, made up nouns, and I'm testing you on if you understand the structural grammar, right? So you know where in the sentence the noun is. So even though you don't know what the words are, you can still identify what it is. Is it a direct object? Is it indirect? Is it a subject complement? Object of preposition, subject. So some of the questions are going to be along those lines, and a lot of the rest of them will be on what we'll cover today. There's only 12 questions, so but yeah, I figured I was quizzing you on everything you should know. So even though I didn't give you 50 questions or whatever, the 12 should give me some data to see how well you guys are picking this up. So before I start with the lecture, you guys got any questions, comments, concerns?
How's it set up on the quiz when you're doing the labeling of the sentences?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me show you. I'll log in to Moodle as a student. That way you can see it from a student's eye here.
And we know what to expect. That's all that matters.
It says the quiz isn't available. What? Oh,
Yeah.
I need to fix that.
Well, no, I'm glad it wasn't because I didn't realize it was going to be on the other half too because I was going to take it today.
Yeah.
I was like, I better wait. It's no wonder it's probably not available.
You fix that. I'll enable it for right now. All right, so I want to share the screen so you can see. Okay. Do you guys see the screen where it says noun problem set
Yes.
quiz? Okay.
Yeah.
So when you take it, um, like each question gives you specific directions, but some of them, for the short answer, the majority of them are short answer. I think I might only have one multiple choice on here. So it's really important that you're precise with your wording. So, like for this one, I'm not going to give you the answer, but like let's say you think it's the indirect object, right? Type indirect object in the answer box. Nothing else. Just the word indirect object, subject complement, or whatever it happens to be. Okay, so use the exact phrasing. Don't mess up the spelling because otherwise the computer might count it wrong. So the first 6 questions are about kind of like what we were doing the other day with nonsense words, and the last 4 or 5 questions are about things that we're going to talk about today. But yes, use the exact spelling. Don't enter any words that don't have to be there. Okay. put subject, type subject. If it's direct object, type direct object.
I mean, you have it written above the question, right?
Right.
So,
Right. I gave the direction on every just to avoid confusion.
and that is best.
I asked you about gerunds and infinitives. I asked you about articles. A couple of things here. So pretty self-explanatory. Hopefully you guys will all do well on it, especially after hearing the lecture today. All right, so a couple things first. Um, I need to look at the discussion questions for today too. Let's see. So one thing to look out first is plurals. Okay, so with nouns, since the Middle English period, it has become commonplace in the English language to put S at the end of a word to signify that it is a plural word. Cats, dogs, um, lions, tigers, right? You put S for the vast majority of words. You put S at the end to signify that they're the plural. But there's a lot of irregular nouns that the irregular nouns, they're either nouns that were in the original Old English language, or they were words that came over from Latin. And the way that Latin does plurals is a lot different than the way that English does plurals. So some of those Latin style plurals, lots of times in Latin, you have to learn Latin grammar. You have to learn the case. So is it nominative? Is it accusative? Is it genitive, dative? You have to learn the case to be able to figure out where it goes in the sentence. Well, like US is a neuter now, alumnus and alumni. So in Latin, the alumnus, that US at the end, is a inflection showing that it's singular. But it depends what inflection you're using too. The nominative was the subject, the accusative is the direct object. In this case, it's an accusative, or it's a nominative rather. But alumnus, US, that's a singular nominative. Alumni, um, that's plural, and this is a neuter noun. So neuter nouns don't have gender, so they take the I as the plural. So if you were reading Latin, if you saw alumnus and alumni in the same sentence, you would know alumnus is singular because of the ending. Alumni is plural because of the ending. It seems a lot more simple just to put an S, right? So that's you could say that was an innovation of our language in some small part. But we have other irregular nouns that you kind of got to keep up with. Fungus. Well, you don't say funguses, right? You say fungi. Mouse. You don't say mouses. You say mice. You don't say gooses. You say geese. Deer. Deer is one of the strange. Deer and sheep and moose. Those are all words where it's the same word, whether it's singular or plural. There's really no indication in the sentence, and whether you're talking about one or many, except maybe perhaps the context of the sentence around it. So deer was the one that was in Old English that made the cut. I think I have a discussion question up about this. My discussion question says there's lots of uncommon nouns whose plurals do not end in S. Some examples from the book and other sources include agenda and media. Agenda, media, I'll type those here. Agendum, agenda is the plural. Well, today, like we think of an example, like whenever you say you have an agenda, or here's the agenda for today's meeting. Well, you're not talking about more than one thing. You're talking about just one thing, right? So you don't say here's an agendum for the meeting. You say here's an agenda. So here's a case where we've kind of forgotten what the proper plural is from the original Latin. We have we have phenomenon, radius. I have the list on the question: phenomenon, radius, instead of radiuses. It's radii, right? Um, Index. Traditionally, you would say indexi, but today we would say indexes. Octopus, octopi, crisis, crises. You don't for child. You wouldn't say childs. You say children. And then cactus and cat is another. So we'll type some more of these here. Cactus, cacti.
Professor Yeager, sorry. Me and Maggie are just now joining. We just got out of practice, so we didn't know the time or anything. Coach held us a little later than we were supposed to be held. So apologize for our tardiness. We don't have our phones and can't see the time during practice.
Oh, you're good. I'll mark you both down. I just really started getting going anyway.
And also, we're at the end. We just have our meeting. My coach sent me out here. Is it okay if me and Maggie do our meeting real quick? We just talk about practice, and then we'll both be on the phone.
That's fine.
All right. Thank you.
Phenomenon, radius, octopus, crisis, child, and cat. I think that's it. So, what are you? Let me ask you guys this. Let's pause for a moment and see what you guys think for some of these. Let's take a deer for an example. So, you probably, especially if you live in the Appalachian region, you've probably heard people say deers plural is the plural instead of just keeping deer as both the singular and the plural. Um, have you guys heard people refer to it multiple deer as deers before? Any of you? Azad
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You probably hear it all the time, Amelia.
Yeah.
From, also from here. What do you all think of that one? Um, is it kind of silly just to keep the same word for singular and plural? Are people right to say deers?
I think it just depends on how they're saying it. I mean, it really doesn't matter to me. It's just the only confusing part is, are they talking about like the deers, I guess, in a possessive form? You know, like they
Right.
have ownership of something, or they're actually talking about plural. So that's the only time I get confused about that. But usually you can tell by what they're saying.
Right? Maybe your casual conversation and you see two of them, right? So you know that it's plural.
Yeah.
Um,
It does sound weird though to me. I don't know.
to say deers,
Yeah.
can you put your finger on why?
No. I guess just the way I've always spoke a certain type of way. I don't know. I try to be proper in my speech. I mean, it's not even something I make a conscious effort of. It's just something that maybe I did when I was younger, but now it's just something that I just do. So it just
What about
doesn't sound correct.
what about some of these other ones? Um, instead of goose, the plural's geese. Um,
That's
just,
easier to wrap your head around, I think.
it's easier to so gooses.
Yeah.
Rather,
Well, I mean, yeah, because geese does sound better than gooses. Um, I don't know if it's just stuck in my head that double E's plural, but it sounds better, I guess, when you say it.
what about
But the,
moose? What about moose? Moose or mooses?
I don't think that one bothers me as much, but I know the proper way to say it. So, but I can see how mooses might sound okay to someone, but I don't know. I
Yeah,
guess it was
it
stuck in
doesn't
my head.
it doesn't bother my ear to hear mooses
Really?
rather than moose. Um, sheep. What about sheeps?
I don't think that's a big deal either.
No big deal there.
Now
Cack.
those with the double S's. Sorry, those are kind of weird to try and add an additional S.
Which
I can see
one? The
like
radius.
radius, octopus. Um, I can see why they changed it to the I sound at the end, the long I. But because it's kind of weird to have those double S's. I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't sound right to say octopuses.
Right. It just sounds weird.
Radiuses,
Yeah.
cactuses, funguses. Right. So something just sounds off about that, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just because those are Latin words. I think that's why they sound off. Like our, even though all you guys don't know Latin unless you've taken it at some point in your life, um, a lot of those Latin rules are put in your brain. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
Um, Azat, what do you think of some of these? Um, as a person who is a second language learner, do some of these plurals like deer or deers, do some of those
Mhm.
sound off to you?
Um, oh, I think personally for me, like if people were to mention deers like sheeps, I would not second guess it. As in, I would think that it is correct as well, just because I feel like we're not really familiar with the irregularity of the plural form of deers and also for sheep as well. But for other words, for example, children, radius, radii, phenomenon, phenomena, I think that's something that we are familiar with because it's completely irregular. And it's something that we learn in school as well. But for the deer and also the word sheep, I think it's quite new to me, to be really honest. So yeah.
So you would be fine hearing the S then.
Yes, yes, honestly, because I think personally, like for me, I'm half Chinese, so I live in a Chinese community. So usually we would just add s to every single plural nouns that we have. But that's basically how the culture really is. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. That What about you, Autumn? You're here as well. How does some of these sound to your ear, like deers or mouses?
I wouldn't say, like, I wouldn't add the S onto them just because I learned at a young age, like, the plural is mice instead of mouses. But a bunch of people, I feel like, don't follow those rules here. Like, they just don't care. Like, look at all the deers out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they just, I don't know, they just add S on everything.
Yeah, I think you're right. Especially in this particular dialect we have, right? We tend to do that. Yeah, so it should make for an interesting question if some of you guys decide to tackle that one. Um, Agenda is probably the most interesting word on the list, I think, just because today we have taken this plural uh, and made it into a singular. Today is pretty much agenda for both plural and singular, even though agendum is the original singular. Same way.
It almost sounds plural too, with that at the end. It's weird.
Yeah,
Like it would be the opposite.
Yeah, the would suggest that it's singular in the Latin. Alumnus and alumni today you don't really hear people say I'm an alumnum or an alumnus, right? People say I'm an alumni. I am an alum university, right? I don't think I would say I'm an alumnus of West Virginia University. That's the proper way to say it, but I don't think 98% of the usage, I don't think people say it that way. Yeah, our language and its many, many contradictions. That's about all you can say. Here's this next concept is one that I found that when I've worked with second language learners in the past, ESL students, found that lots of them will oftentimes struggle with this next concept. Before I taught this grammar class, before I started really studying this, the simple stuff, it was really hard for me to always explain which article do you use in which case. So a, an, and the in our speech we have these articles, right, that oftentimes anticipate the nouns. And the question is, when do you use which one? So the basic rule is A is used whenever you're talking about something that's not specific. Maybe you're talking about something kind of abstract. So a cow, right? Well, maybe you look over into a field of cows and bring me a cow. Right. Well, if you say a cow, you're not pointing to a specific cow or say bring me that one. You're just saying, hey, bring me any one of those cows, right? A cow, rather than compare that to if you would say bring me the cow. Well, if you use the is used for something that is specific in nature. So that's something that you can kind of point your finger to. So that's a very specific noun. The White House, right? There's lots of. If you said a White House, that might mean just a generic White House on a street somewhere. When you say the White House, that is where the President of the United States lives, right? So you can kind of see the difference here. A is used whenever you're talking about something generalized, and the is when you're talking about something extremely specific. And so whichever article you pick oftentimes depends on the context of the sentence. So lots of times people will use, lots of times I don't even think we really think about it, which ones we do. As native speakers, we just do it. But that's the rule with a and the. A is general, the specific. And you use an. This is another interesting discussion question. But you use an when it goes before the noun that starts with a vowel. So A, E, I, O, U are your vowels, right? So igloo. You wouldn't say a igloo or the igloo. You're supposed to say an igloo. An. You use an when it goes before a noun that starts with a vowel. There's some words that are irregular with that. Hourglass. You wouldn't say a hourglass, you'd say an hourglass. Can any of you guys guess why for that word?
The beginning sound.
Right. You're almost there, Amelia. What's going on with the beginning sound?
It sounds like a vowel, even though it's a silent H. So
Exactly, right.
So it sounds weird because you're used to putting that in there that way. If you're a native English speaker, of course, I can see how that would be complicated for someone who does not. So if it's a second language.
Right. So out that H is silent, right? So the next letter is a vowel, ow, that O sound. That's why we would say an hourglass instead of.
You know what's funny? I just made the connection. I never realized that before until you just said, "Hey, why do we do that?"
Right.
Just came to me.
You never thought about that before?
No, never. Or why you automatically know to do that? It's because the vowel sound. Now I know why.
Yeah. An herb. Right? Herb is the same way. That H is silent. So you're supposed to pronounce it herb instead of herb. Some people would say herb, but it's technically herb. Think of another word. I'm mostly thinking of H words, just because the H is typically silent. Can you guys think of another word that you would use "and" for that the first letter isn't a vowel?
No, I found umbrella. That makes sense. And umbrella. It's a U. So anything that
Umbrella.
starts with a U. Yeah. I'm trying to find an unusual word though.
I know what we can do. I have the good old AI in me. Let's ask it. Can you give us some words that go with "and" despite the first letter being a consonant? Let's see if it gives us a list here. It's mostly just H words. Our, honest, honorable, air, herb. It's saying for, it'll also saying for abbreviations, you would put an N instead of an A. So an NHL game, an NHL game. Instead of saying a NHL game, you would say an NHL game, an NFL game, an MLB game. So I guess it's commonplace to also use an whenever you have like an abbreviation like that. Why that's the case, I couldn't even explain. You. But now that I think, say it. You don't say a MLB game, the MLB game. It's usually an MLB game. So yeah, that's a really, again, if you ever worked with a second language learner, lots of times articles become an issue. Like I said, before I taught this class, I found it very hard to explain why you picked which one. It just came natural. Well, there you go. A is generic, the specific, and is with a vowel. Or if it starts with an H, you can bet that H is silent, and there's probably a vowel after that. Again, our darn language and all the exceptions to the rule. One thing that the book goes into great detail about that I'm not going to get too in depth with is predeterminers, determiners, post-determiners, and the noun root. The book goes into like excruciating detail, I think, about if you have a bunch of nouns strung together in a row, how do you put them together? I don't think it's really that important to break it down that intensely. Your brain, this is a case where your brain just knows the order that should be in. And trying to break it down into a scientific explanation, I think, is kind of silly. But the order is predeterminers go first, the determiners are second, post-determiners are third, and then the actual noun. So we can kind of build a list here. Both is a predeterminer. My second cousins, right? Both my second cousins. If I told you to cousins, both my second. If I gave you those random words in order, and I said put it together, you wouldn't even really have to think about it too hard. Right? You just know your brain does the work for you. It knows that you would put it as both my second cousins. No other way really would sound right to your ear. So I actually do have a question about this on the quiz. But my advice here is don't think too deeply about the science behind it. You always use a predeterminer before a determiner. Don't think too deeply about that, because this is just a case where you naturally do it as a speaker of the English language. So with that said, you can guess other than maybe one quiz question, and I'm not going to ask you too much about it because I don't think it's really worth going that deeply into. Questions about that before I continue? Let me ask you guys this question. If I did give you that example, like cousins both, my second, you think it's really easy to flip it into the order it needs to go in?
Yeah, I might look at it for a second, but as soon as I read it, I probably could. But that's me.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I could see where it would be something difficult for a like if you were teaching in this English. In that case, it would be super important to explain like why this word goes before the other word and stuff. But for us native speakers, I don't even for whenever I grade writing, I don't really ever see this as a problem. So I think this is just one of those cases where they don't have to go too in depth with it like the book does. And the last concepts that I wanted to go over today, I'm actually might let you guys go a tad bit early today. I've got a lot going on anyway. But the last concept we'll do is gerunds and infinitives. And this gerunds and infinitives are they're not like nouns do within a sentence. So gerunds can be a direct object. Gerunds can be a subject. Gerunds can be an indirect object or the object of a preposition. So they can fill any of those functions within a sentence, but they're not nouns. What a gerund is you're pretty much taking a verb like laugh or drink, and you're adding an ing onto it. And, in doing so, you're making it like a noun. So this sentence, laughing is the best medicine. Laughing, ing, that is a gerund. And in this case, that's a gerund functioning as the subject of the sentence. So gerund subject. It's not a noun, it's a gerund, but it's working in the structural grammar just like how a noun would. Drinking is bad for your liver, right? Drink is a verb. Add that ing and it turns into a gerund. Drinking is bad for your liver. Infinitives are the same way, but infinitives is when you start with to, then you have a to, and then you have the basic verb, right? The root verb that doesn't have any changes to the tense. So to go, to eat, to sleep, to dream. That is when you put a to in front of the basic verb. To that's called an infinitive. And infinitives work the same way. They can also function like how a noun would in a sentence. And there's an old rule called the split infinitive. And this is what Amelia was asking about at the beginning of class. The 18th century grammarians came up with a rule saying you should never put a word in between to and the verb. You should never do that. That's called a split infinitive. Well, the most famous science fiction television show in history, every time you watch an episode, it splits the infinitive, right? Captain Kirk or Captain Picard will always tell you at the beginning of an episode of Star Trek to boldly go where no man has gone before. Right? Putting boldly in between the two, that is splitting the infinitive. It probably wouldn't sound as cool if you said to go boldly where no man has gone before, right? Even though you're saying the same thing, it doesn't sound as cool. that's probably
It gives you more. It works your imagination more, is what it is. I think.
Yeah.
Immediately, how they're approaching it, right? But something else I noticed with the infinitives, instead of splitting them or using them at all, you can just change the verb to ing. And you only have to say like to run instead of saying to run to the store, running to the store. Do you get what I'm saying?
You want to? I would recommend against that, Amelia.
Okay. It's just something I noticed in my head. I'm like,
Yeah.
Change this to running instead of to.
Well, I would recommend against that because we also have a rule against sentence fragments.
Mm-hmm.
Sentence fragment is when you have a sentence that isn't a complete sentence, like running to the store, for instance. If you put running to the store, period, that's not a full sentence. You're missing.
That's like a text, right?
And that's like, yeah, that's a texts oftentimes take the form of sentence fragments, right? So if you say that I am running to the store, well, the I is the subject, am is the verb, running is the subject complement, to the store is the preposition phrase, right? So it's a whole sentence at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to avoid making infinitives into gerunds, I think, because it can lead to another problem, which is sentence fragments.
Unless you're wording your sentence correctly, anyhow, you just change it around.
Yeah. So if you said boldly going where no man has gone before,
yeah,
that's not a complete sentence, right?
Right.
So the reason why that rule exists is because let me see. Wish I had a copy of the Latin. Let me Google something real quick, and I'll show you exactly why that's a rule. Okay, I found a good chart. Let's see. So here's what we call a principal parts sheet in Latin. Okay, and the infinitive in Latin always takes a. You can make an infinitive into one word in Latin, pretty much. So the word laudo, that's a verb that means to praise, to laud. Right? You might have heard the word laud. That comes from the Latin verb laudare. Well, you have to. So that's the basic root of the word. To praise, laudare. Well, if you were changing it to another tense, like I praise, right? You'd have to trim off that ARE and put O.
Kind of like Spanish too. Spanish does that as well. It changes, if it's a female saying it or I, like my name is, me llamo. That's that O means that's my name. So it's the possession. It lets you know who's saying what.
Right.
So that's why, I guess, the whole infinitive.
those pronouns and things like that in there.
Mm-hmm.
But the like laudare, are, that's just one word. You don't have to say to praise. That literally is one word that means to praise. So the 18th century grammarians tried to model their language on Latin. That's why they had a problem with putting something in between the infinitives, because in Latin it was only one word. So if you'd say to loudly praise or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would say laudare and then the adverb loudly after that. The to praise is it's one word. I don't know if I'm making sense here.
No, yeah, no. Where I've learned, other languages, I have some, idea of what you mean. I do, because they do give you the basic of the word, the basis of the word. This is that, and that means to eat, to do, and it's like that with most languages. Not all, but the ones that I've learned thus far. So. And then you take that basis and you change the ending or the beginning based on the pronoun that you're using, or like we're going, stuff like that.
Yeah, if any of you guys have ever taken Spanish or French or a lot of the Romantic languages that sprung out of Latin,
Mm-hmm.
they still,
yes,
you still pretty much do that in those languages too.
Yes, you do. That's why I totally get what you're saying now. Makes sense.
Yeah, I'd never thought that taking Latin as my language would have been beneficial at all, but it actually helps me a lot with stuff like this.
Yeah. You don't realize that it'll help you with learning how to do your grammar properly.
Yeah, you said you took it before, didn't you?
Yeah. I took 1 year in high school.
You might actually remember that about those verbs.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the end of the chapter on nouns. So it took us might as well say 2 days to cover all that information. So, but hopefully now you guys know a lot more about nouns than what you knew before.
Absolutely.
That's the hope, at least.
Guess we'll find out, right?
I guess we'll see with the quiz results. So next week the chapter will be the verb chapter. We'll spend the whole week with the verb chapter. And once we get past the verb chapter, we'll start speeding it up a little, like talking about adjectives. That'll probably only take 1 day, for instance. So, but the verbs, there's so many rules with verbs that we'll need to spend 2 days on it next week too.
Okay. So have that chapter read.
Yeah, the structure of the class will be pretty much the same. I'll go over the concepts and then maybe have some practice problems written out for you that you can do. Before you guys take the quiz on the nouns, I would suggest that you take a look at the questions at the end of the chapter, page 42 to 45, with the nouns. It gives you some problem sets, especially to look at the ones about direct objects, indirect objects, subject complements, and all that. And you can do it. You can do those questions, and then in the back of the book, for the odd numbered ones at least, it gives you a little key to see if you're on the right track. So I would recommend at least doing question, let's see, I think doing question 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's see. I think doing questions 5 through 9 will help you with the quiz that I wrote for you.
Okay. 5 through 9.
Yeah.
All right. As far as subject's concerned, you don't add the to the front of it, do you? You just add whatever the noun subject is, the word, the one word.
Are you talking about just any noun that's the subject of the sentence?
Right, right. If these in it, yeah. The.
No, you add articles to those too, right?
Okay, okay.
You
That's good to know.
You wouldn't say cow mood, right? You'd say
Yeah.
the cow mood.
Gotcha.
Articles go in front of nouns pretty much all the time, right?
Okay.
They're really it's rare that you see a noun in isolation away from an article.
So make sure you include the articles in your answers.
For my quiz, like I don't think I told you to write the noun down or anything like that.
Okay.
I just asked you to identify what part it is.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. You sure did. But you showed us.
So, like I said, the three of you, you post your discussion questions. You don't have to respond to anybody since you were here. Okay, you can if you want, but I'm not going to make you. You got to have some perks for coming to the Zoom, right?
All right.
I'll try to get some of the stuff that I owe you graded this weekend as well. Those first couple of presses, and I did grade your first day response. I did grade that. But I'll try to get you, especially those presses, back over the weekend.
Sounds good. Everybody enjoy your weekend. I'll see y'all next week.
All right, see you, everybody.